Emma Sanders had worked the morning shift at Joe's Diner for the past 2 years. The regulars called her reliable, efficient, maybe a bit too quiet, but they didn't know what it took for her to walk through those doors every day, tie on her apron, and greet the world with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The scars on her face weren't the first thing customers noticed, but they never missed them either. Faded burn marks traced across the left side of her cheek, extending down the side of her neck, disappearing beneath her collar. Her arms bore smaller traces, scarred patches that told a story most people never asked to hear. Not that she would have told them. Some customers would go silent mid-sentence when she approached. Others whispered behind menus. A few were bold enough to make comments under their breath, thinking she couldn't hear. Poor girl, must have been in a fire. Wonder what drug she was on. Yikes, that face. Don't let her serve me. Emma heard it all. Every word. Every sigh. Every sideways glance. She never reacted. Instead, she focused on the little things. Making sure coffee cups never ran dry. Memorizing orders before they were spoken. Smiling just enough to be polite, but not so much that it invited questions. She wore long sleeves, even in the summer, tugging the cuffs just enough to hide the black ink on her wrist, a tattoo most people mistook for a smudge or a bad decision from a wild youth. But that ink meant everything. It was her unit insignia, 10th Medical Evacuation Battalion, a mark she'd earned overseas, not in battle but in the aftermath. She'd been a combat medic before the fire, before the explosion, before the headlines stopped covering the war. Now, she served coffee instead of wounded soldiers. It was easier to let people assume she was a tragic case. A mistake. A burn victim with a past no one wanted to know. Easier until that Monday afternoon, when a new customer sat at table 4. When his eyes locked on hers, not with disgust or pity, but recognition. And when, for the first time in years, someone looked past her scars and saw the truth. Mondays were usually quiet, but today was different. A sudden stream of travelers had pulled off the highway, due to a detour, flooding Joe's Diner with new faces. Emma moved quickly between booths, her notepad a blur, refilling coffees, clearing plates, and trying to ignore the usual stares. That's when she noticed him. He was older, maybe mid-60s, with a short military-style haircut and a posture that didn't bend, even when seated. He wore a faded green jacket with no visible insignia, just a name tag that read Howard. His eyes followed her, not rudely, but sharply, like he was studying something familiar. He ordered only a black coffee and a turkey sandwich. As she returned with the mug, Howard's gaze dipped briefly to her left wrist. She instinctively adjusted her sleeve, but not before he asked quietly that the 10th medevac? Emma froze mid-motion. Her fingers tightened around the coffee mug as her eyes slowly met his. He didn't look amused. He looked serious, respectful. "You were there," she asked. 06 to 09, he nodded. 8th Infantry. "You folks pulled our squad out of a bad ambush near Marja. We lost 3, would have been all of us if not for the evac team." Her throat tightened. "I was with the team in that sector." Howard gave a slow nod. "Then, you were one of the people who made it happen." Before Emma could respond, a loud laugh echoed from the next booth. A man with greasy hair and a wrinkled t-shirt elbowed his buddy, motioning to Emma. "Bet she got those burns from a trailer fire. Probably meth." The others at the table snorted. Emma stiffened. Her smile faded. She turned to leave, but Howard's voice cut through the noise like a blade. "You boys think that's funny?" The booth went silent. One of them shrugged. "It's just a joke, man." Howard rose slowly, his spine still straight, his eyes cold. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten. But the room felt like it dropped 10 degrees. "She served," he said simply and loud enough for the whole diner to hear, "while you sat home making jokes." Emma stood still, a plate of hash browns shaking in her hand. She didn't know this man, but in that moment, he stood for her when no one else ever had. And for the first time in years, someone turned the silence in the room into something other than shame. The diner fell into an unnatural hush. Forks paused midair. A glass clinked faintly as someone set it down too carefully. Howard didn't budge. His eyes remained locked on the men at the booth, challenging them not with anger, but with authority. "You know how many medics came back burned, shot, broken?" he asked, voice steady. "You know how many didn't come back at all?" The men mumbled something and looked away. Howard leaned in just slightly. "You owe her respect, not your mouth." He turned then, his shoulders still square, and looked directly at Emma. "Don't ever hide that tattoo," he said. "Not after what you did." Emma could barely speak. She nodded, a lump in her throat, her mind spinning. She looked around the diner, all the eyes that once judged her now watching with something else entirely. Curiosity, regret, even admiration. As Howard sat down again, Emma placed a plate of hash browns on a nearby table and walked into the kitchen. Her breathing was short, her eyes burning. One of her co-workers, Denise, followed. "Emma, you okay?" She nodded, slowly wiping her hands on her apron. "I'm fine, just not used to that." "To what?" Denise asked gently, someone seeing the whole story. Later, when her shift ended, Howard was still there. He'd waited through the whole lunch rush. When she approached, he stood and handed her a small card. On it was a faded photo, a young version of himself, sitting next to a chopper, helmet in hand. Written on the back, "Marja, 2007, saved by a ghost with burn marks and bravery." Emma read the note twice. She blinked. "You remember her?" "I don't forget heroes," he said, "and I recognize the ink. Only medevac units wore that one." That night, Emma sat in her car for a long time before driving home. She looked down at her wrist, the tattoo partially visible under the sleeve. For years, it had felt like a secret shame. Now it felt like armor. 2 days later, Joe called Emma into his office. She expected to be reminded about clocking in late once or twice the past week, but instead, he held up a photograph. "I heard what happened," he said, "and Denise told me what that tattoo really means." Emma stayed, quiet, unsure what he was leading to. Joe turned the photo around. It was the same image Howard had given her, now printed in black and white and framed. Alongside it was a simple plaque. "Emma Sanders, Combat Medic 10th Medevac. Wounds heal. Service never fades." "We'd like to hang this by the counter," he said gently. "Only if you're okay with it." Emma stared at the frame. Her eyes welled up. No one had ever acknowledged her past, not like this. Most people tried to look past it. Some looked away. But Joe? He was inviting the world to see it. "I'd be honored," she whispered. Later that evening, after the picture was mounted, customers stopped to look at it. Some nodded. A few even said thank you. Emma felt something loosen inside her, a knot she'd carried since her medical discharge. Now, when people stared, they saw the truth first. And her silence wasn't defense anymore. It was dignity. Weeks passed, and the tone inside the diner shifted. New customers still stared at Emma's scars, but they lingered longer at the photo. They read the plaque. Some struck up quiet conversations. One man, a retired Navy officer, left a challenge coin on the counter without a word. And then one day, a young woman came in with her father. She pointed at the framed photo. "Dad, she's the one I told you about. The one who helped that veteran." The man looked at Emma with deep, quiet respect. "My son's in the Army," he said. "Thank you for your service." Emma smiled, a real one this time. That evening, as she locked up and turned off the lights, she looked at her reflection in the diner window. The scars were still there. They always would be. But now, when she rolled up her sleeve and looked at that tattoo, the curved line of the 10th Medevac insignia inked into her skin, she saw more than the past. She saw pride, purpose, and a reminder that some stories don't need to be told aloud, because the ink speaks. And finally, people were listening.